Hello and welcome to Molten Music Technology here in an overgrown Norfolk. Today we're looking at Spark from Arturia, perhaps more specifically the Spark LE or Sparkle surely, particularly as it does this. But to be more precise, we're looking at the Spark 2 software. The Spark LE hardware has been around a fair while. They've recently released a new update, Spark 2, so that's going to be the focus of my review today. The hardware is really good. We're not going to concentrate on it too much, but obviously it's going to play a part. But it's nice and rugged. It's got good feet. You've got a bunch of knobs, a bunch of pads here too, and this trackpad sort of filtery, effecty thing. Transport controls. You know, there's a lot of good stuff on here. It's a decent, good-sized piece of hardware. So that's the hardware controller. It's the software that we're more interested in. And there's tons and tons on YouTube of people playing with this to give you an idea of what it sounds like, of what it can do. So I'm not going to dwell on that, but here's a minute of me fiddling about. I felt the original software was a bit sort of fussy, a bit sort of toy-like. It kind of sort of unfolded itself like some kind of briefcase of beats. But it's very much in the style of what Arturia like to do with their bits of software, to sort of emulate some kind of opening. But I think we're sort of past that now. We kind of want to just get down to the parameters, get down to how to control the thing rather than watching an animation of something opening up. You just want to get on with making your beats. So version 2 seems to have that much more under control. It's a much cleaner interface. It looks a lot better, a lot more professional. So it's clean, it's simple, it's instant, it's unfussy. Let's have a look. So the first page is our main page. This kind of mirrors the hardware, except for the fact you've got 16 pads rather than just the 8. There's quite a few discussions out there that express disappointment that there's no display on the hardware. I don't think that's a particularly big deal. I think you can do pretty much everything on the hardware itself without needing to look up. Although the key thing you need to see is actually the trackpad settings. If you go to something like Slicer, and you can see on here you've got the different settings for the different modes, strobe, pan, repeat, bit crusher, repeat, that kind of thing. These aren't available on the hardware, so when you tap the button here, you don't actually have any idea what mode you're going in for, but it does show you here when you hold it down. So you can know that if you tap it a couple of times, you're going to select strobe, or if you tap it 5 times, you'll hit mix or whatever. So it's a bit hit and miss, but you know, with memory and practice, I'm sure you can get the hang of it. There's a couple of other buttons that don't appear on the hardware, things like copy and erase. They're big ones. The shuffle knob isn't on the hardware, but otherwise you're pretty much mirrored. The sequencer is simple and obvious as a drum machine needs to be. You have your 16 pads listed down the left and a matrix of on and off lights on the right. You can see up to 32 steps at the screen at one time, and you can toggle 33 to 64 over here without any trouble. The sequence is actually called a pattern, and you can store 16 patterns in any of the 4 banks, giving you 64 in total. Each pattern can be up to 4 bars long and 64 steps, and the resolution goes from a half to a 64th. Each pad has its own volume knob and pan knob, mute and solo buttons, that kind of thing. And you can create patterns by clicking in the grid, like so. or you can sequence them from the sequence mode on here, which is these buttons here. So when you're in sequencer mode, you can just snap on here, and that's what's going to go on. Okay, so let's select the kick drum, for instance, and we can have that go through using the sequencer mode. You can just turn them on and off like that. Very simple. At the bottom is a controller lane, which is actually really interesting and lets you do a whole number of different things. You can draw lines for velocity, for instance. You can rub bits out. You have like a relative tool as well here, which lets you change all of the values up and down relative to each other, which is pretty cool. I have confessed to really liking that. And every time you click in here, you're also turning on a step or turning off a step in the main sequencer window as well. All sorts of parameters you can have here. You can have cutoff, resonance, volume, panning, aux, frequency shifts as well. So you could write in all of the automation as much as you like and have that all running. Lovely, very powerful, really like that. Another great feature in here is the export function, which is here at the top. That allows you to export your pattern as either a MIDI file or a WAV file, just literally by clicking and dragging it off to the edge. Ta-da! Or I can click and drag the MIDI file, and it's there as a MIDI file. Desperately easy, ridiculously easy. Obviously probably more useful if you're inside Cubase or some other DAW, so that when you drag that across it instantly appears on a track, and it's a great way of generating loops and grooves and use them in other programs. One thing that's missing from the sequencer page though is any way to route out to an external MIDI device. So you might want to sequence an external synth alongside Spark. It can't be done. It does send out MIDI clocks, so I can sync, for instance, the arpeggiator on my bass station to it very easily. But if I was using this standalone, I don't have any other way of controlling any other external gear. I'd have to do that inside a sequencer when you use it in plugin mode. Tune mode is one of the fabulous features of the Spark. It allows you to play a whole stack of instrument sounds as instruments rather than just as triggered samples. And to do that, you have a tune button, a tune mode, which turns the sequencer pads into a little keyboard, each one just a semitone. Very simple. You can record that as you would any other sequence. Obviously it's helpful if I had some sort of drums going along so I could play in time, but never mind. So very easy. However, what you can't do is I can't play this pad from a keyboard. I can play all of the pads, so that includes that one, but there's no way of routing MIDI note information individually to that pad, so you can't play it from a keyboard, which is a real shame. I find that very frustrating. However, there's other things you can do. You have a tune knob here, which changes the pitch of that sound. So you could map that potentially to like a mod wheel, but that's sort of playing the trombone rather than playing an instrument from a keyboard. So I'm not entirely sure about how useful that is. Still, you do have your keys here which do the job. If we look at sequencer mode, you can see the notes that I recorded. If I just delete that and just start with a single note going through, I can then actually record pitch changes using this. So that's another way of changing it. So I hit record. So I can do it that way. In the controller lane at the bottom, you can add a parameter called tune, and it shows you what is actually there. And then you can move those and change those individually. Very simple, very easy to do. It shows you the semitones as you're moving it about, but it's not particularly elegant. I mean, how hard would it be to put in a piano roll, for instance, or to expand this one synth pad into its own matrix sequencer, so you could just then put in a load of dots and that will create the pattern for you. It just seems like it's an oversight. It's something which could be done, which could be taken to a much greater level, because it's a fantastic feature and you have access to it, but it's somehow limited. It feels like there should be more, and there could be more. So I'd like to see a lot more done with this particular mode, but as it is, it's there, it's very functional, and you can do it, and it's a great part of a drum machine because you have bass lines, lead lines, other bits and pieces, you know, all sorts of different sounds in here that you could be using and making a lot more use of. This is a new thing apparently. You can build up songs in here using your different patterns, and you can lay them out in various columns here, and each column will play in order, in a chain if you like, and then move on to the next column. So you could use it as a verse and a chorus, and you can switch between which one's currently active using these pads here. It's very easy to drag and drop another pattern on, choose your bank, choose your pattern, drop that in, and it appears there. What you don't have is any way to audition a pattern before you drop it in. So I can't start that pattern going before I drop it into where I want it to be. I can go back to the sequencer, dial up that pattern, listen to it, and then go back to the song and drop it in. But there's no simple way of auditioning that pattern in the song page, which is a bit of a shame. That's a bit of a shame. But you know, it's no biggie. Other thing I'd like to do, if I could name these, you know, write a little chorus, verse onto these pads, that would really be helpful to me when I'm in the middle of a live situation and you're trying to keep a grip of what's going on and you've had too many beers. That would be really useful in my view. But it's all dead easy to use, it's intuitive, and you can throw together a song in no time at all. There's a few quirks I've noticed. Firstly, playback is relentless. It just carries on. Whether you're using the slicer effect or any of the other bits and pieces which would normally sort of stop a loop or make a loop smaller, this just carries on, so it moves on to the next loop and you start affecting that. So you know, there are some missing connections which would, for me, make the workflow feel a lot smoother, but it's a simple enough way of building songs out of your patterns. Studio mode is where we get to treat and deal with each pad and its loaded sound individually. You can select your pad on the left or the right, and in the middle you get all the detail on the sound, the parameters, what the sound's made from, and the two effects that you can run. All these parameters are MIDI controllable, so you can control them from either the knobs on the Spark LE or from a controller keyboard. There are three sound engines or sound sources available in Spark. You've got sample-based instruments, you've got virtual analog based, and you've got Rex based or Rex players. So I've just got three instruments set up here: a kick drum, a loop, and a synth. So let's have a look at how they are reflected in the studio side. So first of all, the sampler, which is what we have here. You can have up to 6 samples layered up to give you like velocity, or you can use it in other sort of creative ways. So let's change the samples in here just so I can demonstrate that to you. So I can click on this button here. It will bring up a menu. It says please select the mousse you want to load. That's probably some kind of French humour. I don't really know. So now I have Molten. That's a little bit low. Molten. There we go. So I've just recorded it. So in layer 2 then, let's stick another sample. Layer 3, another one. 4, 5, 6. Okay, you've got the normal sort of sample based things, and I can adjust the start and end point. So very easy. Doesn't have to be velocity based. It can be stacked. They're all playing at once. That's lovely. Random, circular, or threshold. I actually have no idea what that does, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. You can also do it in reverse. You can change the pitch. Of that, you've got attack and you've got decay. You've got individual gain for each layer as well, so you can balance between them and layer them up. You know, it's all good sampling stuff, the sort of sampling stuff you'd expect to find. Next, let's have a look at a Rex. This is quite a simple Rex player. It's already broken up into loops, into slices rather, of course, and you can choose to play a slice, or you can get it just to play the whole loop. You can add an element of randomness in there, so it's now randomly moving from slice to slice. And again, you've got pitch, and pitch can be for individual slices, so you can move through the slice and change the pitch of something individually, as well as the other parameters from before. So it's very simple. It does say on the website that you can put the slices across the pads, but I can't find a way to do that. I don't know how you do that. There's only a handful of Rex files included as far as I can see, but it does let you import your own, although I had some trouble with it saying there's too many slices. My assumption is that it has to have only 16 slices. But like with the sample player, it's dead easy. You just click, choose your file, import it, bang, and you're off. It's really, really simple. So throwing samples in, throwing Rex files in to the different pads and building your own kits that way is ridiculously simple. So that's a great feature of the Spark LE. Of the effects, you get bit crushers, choruses, delays, compressing, distortion, EQ, flanging, limiters, choruses, delays, Leslie, all sorts of things in there, which, you know, it's all good stuff. And the quality of the sound, to me, is excellent. I mean, they're sort of stomp box effects or little rack effects. They're very usable, instantly tweakable, and sound great. And a bit crazy at times. Next, you have the synth bass. For this, there's no play here because it's based on sort of virtual synthesis, which we'll look at more deeply in the modular section. But here, you have the various synth controls which you set up in the modular page that we'll look at in a moment. When you start with a new preset, it always seems to default to the sampler view, and I can't actually change that into the Rex player or into a synth without either loading a template or loading an instrument which I can then replace with my own sound, or by doing something in the modular page. It's a little bit strange. I don't understand why I can't select a pad and then choose what I want it to be: sampler, Rex player, synth, etc. I have to do that somewhere else, and that seems awkward. It seems silly to have to take yourself out of this page to go somewhere else in order to just define the sort of sound that you want to produce. Now, I think it's fair to say that this is an amazing addition to the Spark software. It completely opens up the synthesis engine, giving you access behind the sounds, which gives you the ability to build your own synths and design your own sounds. I mean, the first thing that strikes you is, you know, what the heck is something like this doing inside a drum machine? The second thing that strikes you is, why the tiny window? This is far too small. You can't get anything in there. Every time you select a new patch, it's kind of, oh no, what the heck's going on? You know, it's just ridiculous. It's just silly, you know. I know that perhaps Arturia want to build within this particular form factor. It has to fit within this for some unknown design reason, but it, you know, it just goes towards making it that little bit unworkable. But this is what we have, and you can work within it. You just need to slide about a little bit. But, you know, so we'll try not to mention that again. For most people, I imagine maybe a little bit of tweaking, but they'll probably just pass this by completely. But for the people who want to use it, what a fantastic thing to have. Let's have a look. There's three different things you can use. You can use the sampler, the Rex player, or virtual analog. You can't mix and match. You can use one of them at a time. So when you start a new patch, if you delete the main sound source, it just gives you a fresh patch. So here we are with a pad, an envelope, and outputs. So let's drop an oscillator on. As simple as that. And let's have a look. So we've got no sound at the moment because I need to connect it up. So let's take this thing here, plug that in. No, still no sound. Okay, how about an output? There we go, both sides. Awesome, so there's my synth sound, my oscillator. Now, of course, I can't actually play it. I can't play it from a keyboard. We've already established that there's no keyboard MIDI control over pitch in tune mode, but also I can't yet play it from the keys here either because I've got nothing to tell it to change the pitch, because all the pitch changing in Spark is done through the coarse tuning knob here. So like that. So in order to get this keyboard to change that, I need to essentially assign these to the pitch change. So if we look down at our macros at the bottom, I've got pitch here, and I have to use that in order to control the coarse pitch wheel there. So I do that by saying oscillator 1 is what I want to control. I want to control the coarse pitch knob, and now that is doing what I asked it to. There's some kind of something missing there, as in there's nothing in this modular thing to say really that's what I'm doing, but that's how you do it. So I guess we just have to get on with that and do what it says. So what else can you do? Well, there's tons of stuff in here. I don't profess to be a synthesizer expert, or if I'm even plugging it together right, but from what I could do intuitively, like for instance, I could drop a filter in, and that would make some kind of sense. So I'll take the audio out, and there I have a filter. I could add in an LFO, for instance. Stick this down here, no room for it really, I'll stick it over here. And I'll take the output from this and ram it into some part of this. If I lengthen the noise. There you go, LFO, that's synthesis, isn't it? I think right there, some basic things, a filter, an LFO, an oscillator. So there you are, those are the building blocks of the synthesis. You've got lots of other stuff in here, like you've got a little mini mixer, you've got a ring modulator, bod shift, I don't really know what that is, but it's something to do with the sampler. You've got modulators, all this stuff. You've got strange physical modeling things where you can add string modeling and strum plucking sort of modeling, that kind of thing. Stuff that's well beyond my meager synthesis abilities. But if you wanted to add a sampler, you can't. You have to start again. So if I wanted to drag the sampler in, for instance, it will erase the patch and start again. So now if I go back to the studio page, it's now a sampler, and I can click there and I can choose my sample. Yeah. If I wanted to do this changes into a Rex one, I'd have to delete this module, so it puts it back to a standard patch again. But I can drop the Rex player in, and I can do the same thing with that. Again, much simpler. I can add a filter, I can add an LFO, I can do all the sort of things you can do in a modular environment. So with the sampling, the Rex player, the virtual analog, and the physical modeling stuff that's all in there, it makes the sonic possibilities pretty huge. The implementation of the synth instrument side, where you can't actually play it from a MIDI keyboard, I feel it makes the sound design a bit clumsy because you're sort of fussing around with buttons here when you could probably do with a little bit more keyboard action. So that, and the fact you've only got 6 knobs that you can assign a control to, makes it perhaps a little bit limiting. Because I mean, Arturia have this whole back catalogue of synthesis going on, and these apparently are elements from their larger hardware synth. So I'd really love to see the other library that they have imported in here to allow you to play with that. I'd like to see a MIDI input implemented. Yeah, that would be awesome. That would change this from something which is oddly fantastic into something which could be, enormous and amazing. It's a mixer. It's got faders and stuff, mute and solo buttons, pan, aux sends, that kind of thing. It shows you each of your pads laid out, all 16 channels, with the two effects that they've got plumbed in. Plus you've got these two auxiliary effects, which is what the aux knobs have been around about all this time. But one nice feature that I've discovered is that it's all completely multi-touch. Look at that. You see on my multi-touch screen, I'm moving a whole bunch of faders all at once, or I can move two knobs all at once, you know, whatever I like. But it's exactly what you expect. You've got solo buttons, mute buttons, you know, all the usual sort of thing. If you select a channel, it shows you what effects are being used on that channel of the two, which you can then dial up if you want. Or if you go to the returns over here, it gives you the two master effects that you're using. That's kind of it. It's a mixer. What can I say? It fits perfectly in the form factor. It's simple to use. The layout is great. You can see what's going on. You know, it's great. The multi-touch, of course, is perfect if you're using something like the Microsoft Surface or some other laptop hybrid with a multi-touch screen, and perhaps might go some way towards explaining Arturia's choice of form factor. You know, maybe they're designing this with more of an app feel in mind so that it fits all within a single screen. You're not having to worry about resizing and things like that. You know, could be. There's something like, I don't know, 3,000 sounds or something, individual sounds within here, which is quite a bit. I mean, if you look at individual kits, for instance, you know, we scroll up and down through plenty. You can have a look at all of them. You can filter them out via style and things like that, which can be enormously helpful. Or your user ones, which ones that you've used. Simple. It gives you, if you select on something, it gives you the details on the right of what it's about, who made it, that kind of thing, and you can just load it up by either double clicking it or pressing the load button over here, and the kit comes up. Very simple. Individual instruments as well, you can do the same thing. You can also go to your own disk drives and pull out, you know, I've got a bunch of Rex files in here, which you can try to load up like that, you see. So there you are. You've also got projects. So if you save a whole bunch of sequences together with your kit and everything else, they call that a project. And you can load up various projects that are already that ship with the unit, which just give you a really great example of how everything can work. Including song modes already set up, so you can move that along. Everything is there for you to play with, the whole sequence of thing there. So it's very easy to navigate, it's obvious what it does, things load quick, and off you go. Easy, simple, great. When I first got hold of this, it was about a year or so ago, and I kind of had a bit of a play and then put it on a shelf, and didn't really think that much of it. I wasn't particularly drawn in, but I think initially I sort of was looking at it the wrong way. I was trying to sort of compare it really to something like the Native Instruments machine, sort of an MPC workstation kind of thing, and that's really not what it is. And I think if you try to compare it in that way, then it's just not really going to fit the bill. Whereas this has a much narrower focus, which in some ways is limiting, but in other ways makes it much better at doing what it does well. So perhaps the best comparison that I've come up with is more along the lines of the Korg Volca range. You know, there's a drum machine, a keys and a bass line, kind of analog stuff that's very instant, very fiddly, very, you know, you just get in there and get on with doing it. That's what the Spark is. But it's not all that faffing around with analog where you can't save anything and you can't access a whole bunch of sounds. You have to start everything from scratch. With the Spark, you've got access to a huge library of sounds. You can save everything. You can run it directly within your DAW. You can export MIDI, input MIDI, get patterns out, get samples out, samples in. So it's a very versatile drum machine, but it works in a very similar way in terms of fun and intensity and creation as something like those Korg boxes. The combination of the hardware and the version 2 software gives you an excellent drum machine with some marked MPC functionality and a deeply modifiable synth engine. The modular section is actually it's a little bit weird. I mean, I'm not entirely convinced that a lot of people are going to get too much use out of it, but there's nothing wrong in having depth if you really need it. So the fact that that's there, that they've opened that up, is kind of awesome, really. And I just hope they do a lot more with it and expand it and make it bigger and more exciting. I have my niggles, of course, like not being able to play the sounds from a keyboard, which is probably my main one, I guess. But there's also some holes in the workflow and some quirkiness and bits and pieces like that that could do with some really smoothing out. But for the current pricing of 169 or thereabouts, it's a great piece of kit. You know, I like it. I've had a lot of fun playing with this and getting really under the skin of it, which is where all the power lies. But as it is, what a load of fun. Would I use it live? Yeah, I think I would. Would it replace my machine? I don't think it would necessarily replace it, not yet, but it offers a different way of creating, a different way of performing, which I quite like. So yeah, I think it's very usable in a live situation, and I'm going to be trying that out sometime soon. So yeah, come and visit us again. We'll be doing some more reviews. We've got a lot more stuff coming up. Check out our videos on latency, on tweaking Windows, and if you're in need of a decent audio computer for doing all of this crazy computer music stuff, then come and see us. Give me a call and we can sort you out with a machine that will do the job. See you next time.